Rico has become one of the most frustrating and annoying brawlers to play against nowadays with a seeming lack of weaknesses. This was not always the case before, as he was once a skilled brawler that could only be played on certain maps and could still be countered. He was also kept in a balance with his counterpart Colt, who each had their specific niches that they were good with. In this PowerPoint, let's take a look at the concept of skill degradation and how Rico became a victim of it. Now, let's continue the most worrying trend in this channel, asking for your support. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Only 15% of you are subscribed, so try and get that number up. I know you want. Watch the full video if you're interested in the topic and enjoy. And yes, I copy-pasted that from the last PowerPoint and will continue to do it in the future. Deal with it. With those things out of the way, let's get to talking about ours and Piper's favorite robot, Rico. Before the addition of Ruff's and Belle's gadget to the game, Rico was an extremely unique brawler. This is because of his ability to bounce projectiles off of walls. This allowed him to be the only brawler outside of throwers to be able to shoot and damage people who were behind walls. But what is Rico's main attack? Rico's main attack sees him shoot 5 projectiles per attack, dealing 640 damage per attack. Rico actually has a very long range, with a 9.67 tile range, but interestingly, this isn't even the full extent of his range. If he aimed his attack at walls, his range actually increased based on the angle that Rico was shooting in, but we'll talk more about the intricacies of his bouncing balls later. Now, let's talk about Rico's super. Rico's super is basically what the first batch of Hypercharges were, a flashier version of an ability he already had. The super turned his range from 9.67 tiles to 13.33, fired 12 projectiles instead of 5, and dealt 720 damage per bullet instead of 640 damage. If you hit every single one of Rico's main attack's projectiles, you would deal 3,200 damage to your opponent, which is roughly equivalent to Piper's main attack. If you hit every single one of Rico's super's projectiles, you would deal an absolutely ridiculous 8,640 damage. For reference, this can take a full health meg out of her mech. Of course, 9 times out of 10 you won't be able to hit every single super projectile, but this comparison is more to show the ridiculous damage potential. And this isn't even mentioning the fact that it can pierce enemies, unlike his main attack. When you think of Rico, you think of his ability to bounce his projectiles off of walls. Sure, he has incredible damage potential and has one of the longest ranges in the game, but why think about that when you can bounce your shots off of every wall and think you are a pro? But seriously, Rico's ability to bounce his projectiles off of walls is a great and unique ability that lends itself to certain interesting scenarios. Let's say the map is a pretty enclosed map that has a multitude of walls, like Center Stage. In this map, Rico is not only used for his ability to utilize a large number of walls to bounce his projectiles all over the map, but also for his ability to clear bushes and find out if anyone is hiding. With his large amount of projectiles and the distance he can cover, he can use the middle right and left walls to see if anyone is coming up much more effectively than other brawlers. Rico can also shoot behind the enemy mid-wall if positioned right, forcing enemies into uncomfortable positions in which either Rico or his teammates are able to finish the job. And this isn't even mentioning his ability to completely shut down the far right and left lane with one of his most powerful abilities, the ability to bounce projectiles from the boundaries of the map. This is one of the main reasons Rico is an actually usable brawler who doesn't get instantly giga hard countered if he isn't picked as the last pick. Why? Because this ability gives him the ability to have 4 extra gigantic walls to help aid in bouncing combinations. If he didn't have this ability, he would not be able to shut down the right and left lane in the aforementioned Center Stage. This would also severely impact his ability to bounce projectiles effectively in other maps like Pinball Dreams or Split, for example. But most importantly, it allows him to have guaranteed walls that can never be broken in every game. If the opposing team goes wall breakers and breaks up the entire map, Rico's ability to bounce projectiles is severely diminished, and the only way he can get reliable damage is to somehow get his super without bouncing. This is where the map boundaries come in, as they give a guaranteed set of walls for Rico to use. Of course, most smart enemies will get away from the walls to prevent themselves from getting killed Rico, but if Rico can use it well, or use his super with its insane range, he can definitely be able to get an elimination. I've talked a lot about the intricacies of Rico's bouncing main attack, but I didn't talk about one of the biggest reasons Rico is classified as a damage dealer: his ability to bounce his projectiles off of multiple walls. On some maps, this can make Rico more skillful, as you can use some trigonometry to hit some ridiculous bounces that can be a good help in dealing enough damage to kill the enemy or having enough range to damage them. There are also two sides to every coin, as this ability to bounce off of multiple walls make Rico absolute hell to face off against in other maps. I've mentioned it before, but I will again to demonstrate this point: the map Pinball Dreams. Once you get to the top right or the top left of the map, if you bounce the projectiles off of the top map boundary, you can basically spawn trap the enemy if done right. This makes it incredibly annoying and skillless when having to face a Rico who isn't letting you escape out of spawn, and especially if you don't have a thrower. An even more hellish map to face off against Rico was the Hot Zone map Split. If you allowed a Rick to take control of the right hot zone, the game was completely over. Even Rico's typical hard counter and throwers would still have difficulty in taking care of him. This was because he could just aim the attack at a certain angle in which it would hit the top wall with the bushes. It's difficult to describe, but if you've experienced this, you definitely know what I'm talking. This basically made moving up to that zone completely impossible, as Rico would just stand there and spam the same shot at the same angle for the rest of the game. Very skillful, I agree. But aside from one or two maps that he was broken on, Rico still required some skill on most other maps. There weren't absolutely broken strats where you could just stand still and never have to move or adapt. You had to be constantly adapting, and you couldn't take forever to find the perfect angle to use the attack, as you would be killed. This forced you to think on the fly and use past experience, leading to a good amount of skill for him to play well on such maps. He wasn't completely impossible to pick up, but you would get extremely punished if you had slow reaction skills and took too long to aim your shots, but would also not be able to do great amounts of damage if you couldn't aim properly. This made it so that to be good at playing Rico, you had to adapt quickly, and you had to know how to aim and angle the bouncing properly. Another brawler that required a lot of skill to aim properly was Rico's counterpart, Colt. Colt and Rico are extremely similar with their health, their classification as a damage dealer, their super being a piercing bigger version of their main attack, the nature of their main attack, one of their star powers, their range, and the number of letters in their names. With that last one, I think we have more than enough reasons to say they are similar, but I digress. Having two similar brawlers can work well if they both have unique enough mechanics that differentiate each of them from each other, and this is the case with Colt and Rico. Colt is better on more open maps and is able to deal more damage without having to rely on his super. Furthermore, he has a niche as a specialist wall breakers, which is why he is sometimes usable in walled maps in order to counter throwers, or Rico. On the other hand, Rico is better on closed maps with lots of walls and relies much more on bounces and his super to deal damage. They both also have different counters. One of Rico's best abilities is his ability to increase his pressure range similar to that of a thrower by being able to attack behind walls if aimed right, and also increase by shooting at walls at certain ranges. And this ability is great against brawlers who don't have wall-breaking tools, and Rico can mow them down in heavily walled maps. But he gets mowed down by throwers. See, unlike Rico, who has a makeshift ability to attack behind walls, throwers are able to do it naturally and easily. And this makes it so that the throwers can easily kill Rico without Rico not being able to reliably respond. Brawlers like Dynamite and the twins will absolutely destroy Rico if they aren't stupid and run straight towards the Rico. On the other hand, Colt hard counters throwers and instead is specifically weak against fast brawlers and marksmen, especially Piper. Someone like Piper or Mandy can easily 2 or 3 shot him without even getting shot if they aim correctly. Brawlers like Leon or Crow can use their speed to dodge Colt's shots and assassinate him. However, Colt and Rico do share a similar weakness to brawlers that get too close. Brawlers like Edgar, Daryl, or Fong, if they get close, can easily eliminate the Colt/Rico. A super from either of them could help take them out, especially if it is in a more closed map for Rico, but it's still a gamble whether you will live or not. And this helped preserve a balance between Colt and Rico. They each had their own niche, required skill to master, and they both had their individual and shared weaknesses. But what happens when you remove one of those weaknesses to one of the brawlers, and instead replace it with a no-skill get-out-of-jail-free card? To find the answer to that question, we must first take a look at Rico's kit. Rico's first gadget is Multi-Ball Launcher. With this gadget, Rico blasts 2 waves of piercing bullets with a 12-tile range all around himself, with each of them dealing 896 damage. Rico's second gadget is Bouncy Castle, which allows Rico's next attack to heal him for 256 health each time it bounces, for a maximum of 3,840 healing. Rico's first star power is Super Bouncy, which let any of Rico's bullets that bounced from walls deal 256 more damage. Rico's second star power is Robo Retreat, which made it so that when Rico fell under 40% health, he could run 34% faster and disappeared either when he died obviously or when he came back up 40% health. First, let's talk about Rico's gadgets. For a long time, Rico's Bouncy Castle star power was much better than the Multi-Ball Launcher. It allowed him to heal up large amounts effectively while also attacking at the same time, letting him stay alive longer and not cease to be a threat to the opponents. In fact, it was so good for Rico that it got heavily nerfed twice before being buffed again, showing that it was a very strong gadget for Rico. It wasn't a fully skillless gadget either, as you had to make sure to find the right combination of walls in order to maximize healing and not waste half or even more of the potential healing you could have gotten. But in recent times, this gadget has been completely sidelined by the aforementioned get-out-of-jail-free card, Multi-Ball Launcher. Multi-Ball Launcher used to be a pretty bad gadget for Rico, and originally dealt 320 damage per projectile. It was barely better than just using Rico's regular attack, and was nowhere near as useful as the other gadget, which could heal up to 70% of Rico's full health, while also attacking the enemies at the same time. And then Brawl Stars, in their process to make many of the worst gadgets for brawlers much better, increased Multi-Ball Launcher's damage from 320 damage to 820 damage. This was an absolutely ridiculous 256% damage increase from before. This instantly made Rico's gadget one of the best gadgets in the game. And with the nerfs his other gadget received, this easily became Rico's best gadget. Before, unless Rico had his super or was in a heavily walled area, he could not deal consistently with aggressive brawlers, and they often countered him if used right. But with this gadget buff, Rico's weakness to aggressive brawlers ceased to exist, and with just a click of a button, Rico could absolutely wipe any brawler that got too close off the map, which obviously made Rico less skill. So let's talk about the concept of skill degradation. Don't recognize the term? Neither do I, as I came up with the term because I forgot the actual term for it. But that's beside the point. Skill degradation is the concept of something losing skill over time. This is the case for most of Brawl Stars as a whole as the game moves more to appeal to a casual player base, but this has been especially prevalent for Rico. I've mentioned before that Rico used to take some degree of skill to play and use well, and required at least a basic knowledge of advanced trigonometry. I'm slightly joking, but with this gadget, anytime Rico came even close to another brawler, he could absolutely shred them without having to aim or angle anything. The entire purpose of Rico is to angle his attacks off of walls and to find new and unique angles to best fight the enemy. And this gadget completely removed that aspect of him in favor of giving him a free kill, or at least a large amount of damage with almost no skill involved. Before we talk about the second and final straw in Rico's fall to the no-skill side, let's have a brief conversation about Rico's star powers. Rico's speed star power is basically just a free way for him to run away when he's in a spot of trouble, which incidentally is also the definition of a get-out-of-jail-free card. Interesting. Some people purposefully go low health in order to basically become unkillable with good dodges and speed, but that is quite risky as you have to be 40% health or under to be able to activate it. Rico's other star power makes bouncing his projectiles not only a tool for more range or reaching specific places, but a tool for more damage. I believe this is one of the best ideas in practice for a star power, as it gives players a legitimate incentive to learn how to aim off of walls and to bounce off of them, as now each shot has the potential to deal even more damage. However, in reality, with the addition of the Multi-Ball Launcher and what I'm going to talk about next slide, this star power became toxic and allowed Rico to deal absolutely insane amounts of damage, letting him shred opponents. On June 25, 2024, Rico received a Hypercharge. This Hypercharge allowed his attack to bounce much farther than usual, on top of the regular boosts. Very creative, I know. But this was the final nail in the coffin of Rico's skill. Now, aiming mattered even less, as the projectiles traveled so far that even if you tried to miss, you would probably hit some shots. Despite the fact that it could be aimed, it was mostly just auto-aimed, because why waste time aiming it when you can just hit whatever target you have, even if they're nowhere near? Like with multi-ball launcher, this promoted just blind shooting of Rico's attack instead of careful planning and precision, continuing his skill degradation. To end off the video, let's take a look at the balance between Rico and Colt. Both of them have received their Hypercharges, which has helped boost both of them in the meta. But by the time Rico's Hypercharge dropped, the balance had completely shifted to Rico. Outside of maps where you need a reliable wall breaker, or an open heist map, Colt isn't really the most useful. On the other hand, Rico can even perform well on open maps if he can get to the right positions, and is absolutely broken on heavily walled maps. And now, with Rico's sudden strength against aggressive brawlers, Colt has been completely left behind in the dust, while Rico is thriving in this current meta. Thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.